Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we sift through different sources to really pull out the key ideas on complex topics.
Make them a bit more digestible.
Exactly. And today, well, we're diving into a specific YouTube video. It's called 1018FR, Rose C278 P1 degrees, HAARP operatrix externa, Ioana Sima Method Grifasi.
Bit of a mouthful. It's from the FR Calogero Grifasi Investigations Francais channel.
Right. And our goal here, just to be clear, isn't about verifying any of this. It's more about exploring the claims made in the video.
Especially those from someone they call a remote operator for HAARP, supposedly contacted under hypnosis.
Yeah, so we're just going to unpack what's presented, look at the core themes, see what they're actually saying.
Okay, let's get into it.
So the video starts with this person, Ioana Sima, guiding someone called Rose into, well, a deep relaxation state.
Like a guided meditation or hypnosis induction?
Pretty much. There's a countdown 3 to 1, instructions to relax deeply, and then bam, at the count of 3, Rose is told to connect with the HAARP program.
And describe what she sees.
Exactly. And she starts describing these very large upright iron structures, like huge electrical pylons.
Okay.
She sees several, and they're emitting energy, she says, like lightning, forming this kind of ball of energy in the sky above them.
Wow. And where are they supposed to be?
In a rural place.
Yeah.
Open landscape, no buildings around, very remote.
So think about that initial image, right? You've got this picture of immense power, remote location, creating significant atmospheric effects. Sets a certain tone, doesn't it?
It really does. Then Rose moves on to what she perceives as the targets of HAARP.
And this is where it gets broader.
Oh, yeah. She lists humans, specifically aiming for, like, climate-related destabilization and creating fear during earthquakes.
Fear itself is a target. Interesting.
And also clouds, general weather patterns, earthquakes themselves, and water. Big things with water like rain, but also significant waves and flooding.
So it's a pretty sweeping list. You've got natural phenomena, weather, geology, but also human psychology, right? Fear. What really jumps out at you from that list?
It's the sheer scope, I think. And then she connects it to past events.
Like specific examples.
Yes. She mentions major floods, extreme heat waves. She uses the word canicule and earthquakes.
Okay.
And she emphasizes this feeling of people panicking during these times. The idea presented is that nations are kind of put into a state of dependency through this fear, like blackmail, almost.
So the narrative here is directly linking these big environmental events to, well, a form of geopolitical influence or control. It's suggesting it's not random.
Precisely. Now, there's a part about HAARP projects supposedly expiring in 2025.
Oh, ending.
Well, and that's the claim mentioned. But Rose, in this state, she doesn't see it ending. She sees new projects starting up instead.
A continuation, then. Any details on the new projects?
She mentioned seeing sandstorms and very strong winds.
Okay.
Then the session kind of jumps forward, looking at 2030 and the 5 years leading up to it.
More predictions.
Yeah. She sees ongoing climate destabilization projects targeting certain countries, problems at sea like rising sea levels impacting some nations.
Rising sea levels.
Okay. Also, abnormally powerful winds like typhoons. More earthquakes, of course. It's a recurring theme, this manipulation of climate and elements.
You can see the consistency there, can't you? The narrative keeps circling back to environmental manipulation and its potential impact. Something for you, the listener, to just kind of note.
Definitely. Then the focus shifts a bit to the effects on what Rose calls the mental body when irradiated by HAARP radio waves.
The mental body, how does she describe that? The video doesn't really define it explicitly, does it?
No, not in detail.
Yeah.
But based on her descriptions, it seems to relate to, cognitive function, emotional state, that kind of thing.
And the effects.
She describes desiccation, like an abnormal dryness, also aging, lack of hydration, and mental imbalance.
Imbalance how?
Like unclear thinking, difficulty telling right from wrong, a disturbed, confused mind.
That sounds quite severe.
It does. She also mentions persistent fear, apprehension, nervousness, basically a deficiency in this mental body.
So alongside the big environmental claims, you have this alleged targeting of individual mental well-being. It adds, well, another dimension to the whole thing, suggesting it's not just about physical control.
Right. And then we get into some really, let's say, metaphysical observations.
Okay.
Rose perceives the whole HAARP program as designed intentionally to destabilize populations, the planet itself, and the climate.
By whom?
By individuals, she says, who are driven by a desire for power. They use electromagnetic waves to disrupt existing electromagnetic networks. That's the mechanism for destabilization, according to her.
Disrupting networks. Okay.
And here's where it gets, well, even more unusual. She perceives reptilian beings at the HAARP facilities.
Reptilian beings.
Yeah, drawn there by the energy, apparently.
Right. That's quite a claim.
It is. She also pinpoints the main HAARP structure's location.
Where?
A desert, somewhere in the Middle East.
Okay, consistent with the remote location idea earlier.
And she perceives a specific frequency from the antennas, 10,500. She describes this as too strong and bad for humanity, especially within the context of duality.
10,500. A specific number. It's worth considering, just based on this source alone, what it implies to attribute such specific negative intentions and even, non-human entities to this program. It definitely elevates the narrative beyond conventional explanation.
Absolutely. She adds more detail on the antennas themselves. Says they're controlled remotely.
Makes sense for a large-scale operation.
And there's an underground system to operate and regulate them. The location in rural, empty areas is, again, emphasized partly because the emissions are so powerful and partly for secrecy, like a military zone.
Secrecy and power, okay.
Then her perspective shifts to the control center itself.
What does she see there?
At first, a big office, figures that look like human military personnel.
Okay, standard enough so far.
But then, her perception changes. She identifies 2 reptilians and a leader figure she calls a dragon, operating computers.
A dragon?
Yes, monitoring the main HAARP unit. And apparently they can adjust the frequency, the intensity, based on orders they receive for specific objectives.
So non-human entities directly operating the technology in this vision.
That's the picture painted.
Yep.
And it goes higher. She sees another meeting.
Higher level.
Yeah. A humanoid figure this time, with 3 humans. She identifies them as military and government officials around an oval table.
Humanoid. Okay.
And this humanoid gives orders to the dragon figure after they've discussed things and developed new projects.
What are they discussing?
They're looking at a world map, focusing on potential earthquakes. Greece and Italy are mentioned specifically.
Wow.
And apparently, when Rose telepathically asks this humanoid figure why they're doing this, the humanoid acknowledges her presence.
Acknowledges her and gives a reason.
Yes. The stated reason, according to this humanoid in her perception, is to manipulate world leaders, governments, populations, all through fear, using climate manipulation as the leverage.
Fear, again, the central tool.
And the humanoid apparently adds that manipulating the elements is, quote, easy for them.
Easy. Just like that.
Just like that. Oh, and the duration claim. 25 years under the name HAARP, but 55 years under some other name before that.
So a long-term operation being described, it's quite a narrative, isn't it? A hidden, powerful program potentially controlled by non-human intelligence, influencing world events, manipulating human minds. Think about the layers of control being proposed in this single account.
Definitely layers. And delving into why this manipulation is supposedly easy for these beings.
According to Rose's perception.
Right. First, they were involved in creating the program, collaborating with humans. Second, they just have the technical know-how.
The knowledge base.
And third, critically, these climate events create fear. And fear, in this view, strips people of their free will, their psychological independence.
Makes them susceptible.
Exactly. And the reptiloids are there, apparently, to amplify that fear even more.
Does she suggest everyone is afraid?
Not everyone, but she perceives a large majority are. And the fears are specific. Fear of the disasters themselves, fear of not having resources, basic survival fears.
Understandable fears in those scenarios.
And this loops back to what she said earlier about the mental body being affected, losing its equilibrium.
Right, the mental and emotional impact.
So the natural question comes up in the video. How can people protect themselves from these waves, assuming this is all happening?
What's the answer given?
Rose indicates it's difficult because the waves supposedly affect the hormonal system, thyroid, adrenals, pituitary gland mentioned specifically.
So a direct physiological impact claimed.
Yes, but she does offer a potential defense.
Okay.
A high personal vibration.
Right.
An energetic balance, especially in that endocrine system, that could offer protection.
High personal vibration, energetic balance. These are terms used, but the video doesn't really detail how to achieve that, does it?
No, it's more conceptual, left open. Then there's this interesting shift. Rose is asked to imagine a parallel timeline, one where people on Earth don't fear death.
A hypothetical scenario. What does she see there?
A very different world. People are happy, smiling, planning for the future. They believe in an afterlife. They can project themselves beyond death.
So the fundamental fear is gone.
Right. And their bodies, healthy, glandular systems balanced, and HAARP.
What about HAARP in this timeline?
Inactive, non-functional. She sees no other control programs either. People are just, well, physically and mentally. Illnesses are minor, immune systems are strong.
It's a stark contrast, isn't it, between a reality supposedly dominated by fear of death and one without it. And notice the implication within this narrative. Remove that fear, and programs like HAARP, as described, lose their power. It's a key point being made through this hypothetical.
Absolutely key. Now, back to our timeline. Rose gives an estimate. She thinks about 25% of people have this inherent fear of death. But then adds another 50% people she identifies as religious, who also have a kind of fear related to death. So maybe fear of judgment or the unknown.
Bringing the total to
75%. Three-quarters of people experiencing some form of death-related fear. And she predicts this will actually increase by 2030.
Increase. Why?
Well, looking ahead to 2030 in our timeline, with those predictions of rising sea levels, strong winds, earthquakes.
The destabilization continues.
Right. She anticipates 80% of the collective consciousness will be in fear by then. Though she adds a small caveat, it might have been even higher if some people weren't starting to question things, to think more critically.
A slight counterbalance from awareness, perhaps.
Perhaps. Then she explains the mechanism for how HAARP supposedly triggers earthquakes.
How is that described?
It involves sending waves deep into the earth, disrupting things inside.
Underground waves?
Yes. But also waves coming from the sky, possibly from some kind of vessel, interacting with the underground waves, creating like a microwave effect deep down.
So a combination of ground-based and aerial components for the big ones.
Yeah, that's the claim. Both antennas on the ground and these aerial vessels are needed for powerful earthquakes. The waves are directed into fault lines, causing them to move, to open up.
And this same method is used for?
Creating large waves at sea, she says. Same principle.
And the motive for choosing locations?
Primarily, according to her perception, it's about influencing populations and controlling governments. Geopolitical aims again.
Right. So as we sort of process all these extraordinary claims, the weather control, the mind effects, the non-human entities, the earthquake triggers, what aspects are really standing out to you, the listener? What questions does this kind of narrative bring up for you?
Yeah, lots to think about. The video excerpt we're drawing from then wraps up with Ioana Sima bringing Rose back to, full awareness.
Okay.
So just to recap this deep dive, we've looked at some really remarkable claims from this one YouTube source about HAARP.
And they're remarkable: weather manipulation, earthquakes, messing with human minds, even non-human control aiming for global influence.
Yeah, it's a lot. And again, we have to stress, our goal was just to report what's in that source material.
Yeah.
We're not endorsing it, not validating it.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the information being shared, however unusual it might seem.
So we invite you, our listeners, to just consider the themes raised here. The possibility of hidden technologies, the power of fear as a tool for control.
The connection between environmental events and potentially societal manipulation, even fundamental questions about the nature of reality itself that this kind of narrative touches on.
Right. And maybe one final thought to leave you with, building on this source material but taking it a step further. Regardless of where widespread fear in our world actually comes from, could its sheer pervasiveness create its own kind of cycle? A feedback loop with consequences we don't fully grasp.
It's worth pondering that interplay between collective belief, fear, and the reality we perceive around us.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope it sparked some thoughts and maybe encourages you to seek out diverse perspectives on these very complex and fascinating ideas.